In today's episode, we will talk about can we democratize the critical mineral supply chain? Joining me today is Mr. Prashant Banerjee, Executive Director of Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers and Safe Affordable Fission Engine.
I think this is the right time when you are doing this podcast. The topic is very pertinent, and I think Europe, America, Korea, Japan, and India are now realizing that it's important to focus on availability of rare earth.
Where do you think India stands as of now in this geopolitical chessboard? Are there any partnerships in place? Are we looking towards any partnerships? Are we doing the research in house as of now? Where do we stand in that?
There are 55 blocks has been identified for 30 important critical minerals.
Right.
Out of 34 blocks have been auctioned in 5 tranches.
E-waste has also become a source of the scrap industry in general has become somewhat of a black market as of now.
For reasons, it's a techno-economic, socio-legal issue.
A lot of the countries in the West consider this as a form of their way of somehow supporting and preserving the environment. It is heavily dependent on the global South. They do not feel it just to them that for the price for the world to be sustainable and eco-friendly is paid by them. Hello everyone and welcome to another episode of Vision 2060, a future-focused podcast series, and I'm your host, Samridhi Shoor. In today's episode, we will talk about can we democratize the critical mineral supply chain? Because from EV batteries to smartphone chips, critical minerals form the foundation of the modern life. Yet, as mining is concentrated only in a few countries, global markets are often exposed to supply chain risks, price fluctuations, and strategic vulnerabilities. So, joining me today is Mr. Prashant Banerjee, Executive Director of Society of Indian Automobile Manufacturers and Safe Affordable Fission Engine. With over 30 years of experience in shaping India's mobility and energy future, he's honored with Basil's Order of Rio Branco for his contributions to bioenergy. He brings deep insights into sustainable mobility, clean energy, and the road ahead to sustainability. Thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Banerjee. It's lovely to have you with us.
Thank you, Samriddhi. It's my privilege and honor to be part of this podcast.
So we'll begin with our first question. Dr. Banerjee, you have been at the forefront of the India's evolution towards the EV sector. You've worked with several different policymakers and leaders in different MNCs, which have been innovating in the EV segment as of now as well. And now there's a question of the critical mineral supply chain, a supply chain which I believe in the last few years have become quite unreliable. So, do you think that this particular issue of critical mineral supply chain is more of a geopolitical issue rather than an engineering issue, which was one of the ways we have earlier viewed this particular problem?
Somebody, automobile industry has always been supply chain dependent industry. Automobile industry is having so many parts that even if one part is missing the vehicle, you cannot produce the vehicle. That's why supply
That's
chain has
true.
always been the focus area for automobile industry, and more so in electric vehicle, where you have a dependency of not only the technological dependency, the rare earth metals and
Right.
electronics are also not available within the country, and we are hugely dependent on import. So I think this is the right time when you are doing this podcast. The topic is very pertinent,
True.
and global uncertainty, the changes in outlook of each country is bringing the focus back in supply chain. And for electric vehicle, apart from the range anxiety and the cost of ownership and other related challenges, the most important is the rare earth metal availability, because 90% of the rare earth metal which is going into the building of electric vehicles is
Right.
controlled by one country.
Right.
And I think Europe, America, Korea, Japan, and India are now realizing that it's important to focus on availability of rare earth.
So, like you have mentioned, that US, EU, and other big nations as well are competing with one particular nation, which just go ahead and say the name China as of now. Where do you think India stands as of now in this geopolitical chessboard? Do you think that India needs to align strategically with, let's say, with US? US has this program MSP, which is Mineral Strategic Partnership. Or do you think that we need to align ourselves with some other particular program? Or is there any possible way we can become self-sufficient regarding our dependencies, which are, I'd say it's foreign related, and resource has always been an unfair advantage that some nations have, some don't. But where does India stand in all this?
Samridhi, India is very proud to take a center stage. Now we have become hopefully the fourth largest economy
Yes.
and the third largest automobile market. And with
Okay.
the intention of becoming a developed nation by 2047, Viksit Bharat, and the aspiring rising India's need of mobility is going to increase.
Right.
So, with this sustainability becoming the center focus, decarbonization brings focus on electrification of vehicles. And when you electrify, it's a realization that we are hugely dependent on external resources for procuring not only electronics, but more the battery and motors and magnets. And the recent development, global uncertainty, which is prevailing on supply chain network, it is clear that we are recognizing that India should wake up and start focusing. So we believe that there could be three possibilities. One is we do not have our own resources. We have not yet started exploring and developing the own resources. So we need to focus on that first as part of self-reliant Atmanirbhar India. But also it's important that we rely our cooperation and tying up with global resources. And MSP, you mentioned, India is one of the developing countries which is part of MSP. So therefore, we need to hedge our risk and we need to explore all possible ways. We are also part of Quad cooperation.
Right.
So Australia is one country where we are exploring through our Government of India's mining department. Wherever possible, we need to tie up our resources. We need to explore our own resources and also we should focus on recycling.
Three takeaways for me would be that one, we need to look for resources. We need to start exploring more where we can find these critical minerals. Second would be, I believe, the technological know how about how exactly we can process them, because just finding the resources would not actually make them usable. We also need to process them in a way where we can get them in the form which is actually utilizable. And third, you've mentioned about recycling. I think we do have some idea about the exploration part with the last question. Where do we stand in terms of processing the minerals that we have explored? And how exactly we can build on that technological know how? Are there any partnerships in place? Are we looking towards any partnerships? Are we doing the research in house as of now? Where do we stand in that?
If you see the complexity of management and utilization and application development using this rare earth mineral, we need to focus not only on right from exploration of possibilities of finding minerals. So by May 2025, if you look at, there are 55 blocks has been identified for 30 important critical minerals.
Right.
Out of 34 blocks have been auctioned in 5 tranches. And we are hoping that these 34 blocks which Government of India has identified, we have found lithium, for example, in Jammu and Kashmir, in Karnataka. We have graphite reserves in Arunachal, Tamil Nadu, and Jharkhand. But this needs to be explored. Why it is called rare earth? Because it's available in abundance, but there are multiple reasons why extraction of these becomes difficult. Not only technologically it is challenging, so extraction, exploration, and then processing becomes difficult. So right now it is being exported to Japan, and then Totso is the company with which there is a tie-up. So I believe that we need to have a very comprehensive strategy of developing minerals. 33,000 crores have been actually allocated towards not only R&D but processing, developing, and extraction, and finally utilizing in application. If you recollect, for auto sector, because of this challenge which we have really come across, 1,345 crore scheme for incentivization, localized local partners have been conceptualized by MHI and it's under consideration right now. Like we have auto PLI policies where advanced chemistry cells scheme has been brought out. There is some strategic cooperation between local private partners, public partnership. So I think it's a very long-term strategic interventions, right from skilling, the human resource development, R&D, processing know-how, and everything we don't have to reinvent. We need to collaborate. And that's
Right.
where we are seeing that friendly countries needs to come together, collaborate, and develop.
At this point, I think I would like to ask the question about friendshoring, which is a concept primarily in this supply chain and processing issue that we are facing with rare earth minerals specifically. Do you think that friendshoring and having trusted partners when it comes to processing is actually something that India should look towards, or we should become more self reliant and focus more towards research? Because although thousands of crores, as you have rightly mentioned, have been allocated to develop this industry, but at the same time, I think the government officials and the bureaucracy prefers having collaborations outside of India for the very basic reason that the local vendors which are being developed are not yet at the same level at that of the other companies which are not in India as of now. And I think this is also one of the reasons because of which research is slow to transition towards commercialization. Do you think that India is more focused towards friendshoring than towards developing in-house vendors and local partners in a
I
way?
think we have no option but to explore two-pronged strategy.
Right.
While we have a immediate needs, so it will take time for a while to become self-reliant, develop your own domestic resources. So we need to focus both. We must friendshoring also. We must collaborate. You should not reinvent the wheel. If you can get the technology of recycling, technology of processing, technology of developing your requirements, then I think it would be a good strategy, that two pronged strategy. One is, in fact, I said three pronged strategy. One is not only tying up global resources, collaborate, friend shoring, explore your own resources, but also whatever, for example, mobile industry, for example, vehicle industry, whatever batteries are there,
Right.
whatever rare earth is, you must recycle them. So three-pronged strategy we must work on.
Understandable. And where do we stand in this third point? I think we did not discuss this third point, which is for recycling. As of now, India is one of the major producers of electric e waste that is there. However, I don't think that even 10% of that is in a way processed and recycled so that we can actually get some usable rare earth back from it. And this is also, by the way, I was reading somewhere which mentioned that e waste has also become a source of the scrap industry in general, has become somewhat of a black market as of now, which is controlled by non civil elements in some ways. So, what are your thoughts about that?
I think you are right that unorganized sector have been predominantly handling the waste
Yes.
for reasons. It's a techno-economic, socio-legal issue. So government of India and industry stakeholders have realized that we need to bring them to more organized sector. And CPCB, Ministry of Environment and Forests are doing Herculean job. The Life for Environment initiative of Honorable Prime Minister and various streams of recycling, what's
Right.
called extended producer responsibility concept, which has been brought in for battery, for tires, for plastics, for end of life of vehicles, and also the oil. Everywhere you find that the very clear rules have come in. So for battery recycling, not only for lithium, but for lead acid battery also, now there is a mandate. So we
Okay.
must recycle, and producers are accountable to ensure that certain percentage of recycling you must bring back to the system. And also the unorganized sector, you cannot do away with them. So we must bring them to mainstream. So for that, specific efforts are being put in. RVSFs have been notified, so registered vehicle scrapping facilities, and state governments have also been advised that they have to be mindful that anything you recycle, it has to be done as per the very systematic, environmentally benign processes.
Understood. That's very interesting. I was not aware about that because I always thought that the scrap industry is something which is moving along the way it is functioning, but I was not familiar with that the regulatory authorities is actually making some regulation or asking, like working towards having them in the mainstream. This sounds hopeful for me because this was one of those areas which could generate immense value for the country, and it has always been not tapped entirely. It has always been an industry which has stayed hidden in a way. So that brings me to my next question. You work with almost every single automaker that is there, prominent automaker that is there in the country. Are the automakers in India really ready to localize their value chain, or are they more on the wait and watch side and they're just waiting for when things will become more, I would say, feasible or more prominent for them to change their supply chains and make them more local rather than have depending on global players and markets? Because uh, being an Indian, I would say that there's nothing you cannot find in India. You can find every single thing in India if you know the right person in the right place. And it's just a question of feasibility and whether you really want to take it or not. Whether you want to change that particular thing or not. So, where do the Indian automakers stand as of now, and what do you see behind the curtain? Because we don't know what actual discussions are taking place. What is the sentiment of the market? So, what are your thoughts about that?
It has three aspects, very clear aspect. Number one, if you have to survive in the market, you have to have a product competitiveness in terms of pricing, in
Right.
terms of turnaround time. So depending on the externalities, external supply dependencies could be always dangerous. It only not only add to cost, but it also add to your production delays. It can also add to your turnaround time. So therefore, as a sheer business common sense, you must actually have at a reasonable cost, easy to access, just in time deliveries.
Okay.
So that is anyway prompting auto industry to always explore that how easy and how best price supply can be assured. So this is one side of the story, which is a natural market driven forces.
Right.
But government of India is also mindful that because one country is holding 90% of the rare earth metal, they have a economic scale advantage, they have advantage of ahead of curve. So therefore, they are able to offer you the price point which others cannot, startups cannot give you. So therefore, government of India is mandating that if you need to get or avail my incentive and my scheme benefits, then you must ensure domestic value addition. So you should continue to demonstrate that you are doing something domestically. So this is the second part of the story. And the third part of the story is that because as we are growing electrification of transport, you need to have hedging of your supply chain.
Right.
So these are the three factors which are anyway determining that automakers are looking towards more and more local. Right now, for example, if I tell you for auto PLI, 50% DVA, and that is domestic value addition, is a mandate if you want to avail. So whether it's a battery localization, whether it's a traction motor localization, why are we struggling today with this ban of China? Because there is a curb on rare earth magnets coming, and now we had already decided that we will localize it, but input material is not coming, so you are not able to produce a vehicle. So therefore now we are looking at the alternate source. So for example, ferrite magnets, another alternate source. So for example, if you look at what has happened in Europe, what has happened in America. In America in 2023, they realized that they are absolutely dependent on China. So they have started that program.
MSP.
Yeah,
Right.
there is a company in Texas where government of US has invested money and Apple has put in money, $500 million advance, so that they can develop alternate source. And they have from Colorado, they are able to extract, and hopefully by 2028 they will be able to ensure that local needs they are able to meet and external dependency can be reduced. Same is Estonia in Europe. Actually, they have started a production plant, and European Union has realized that they have to reduce the dependency. So Estonia plant is working around the clock and hoping to support European. If you look at Japan, then LG in Korea, LG, and Japan in Toshiba, they are working in a big time to ensure that this can be mitigated to a greater extent. So India also should focus
So
to
alternates.
become more and more reliant, self-reliant on this front.
So, what exactly all these countries are working on? This is very interesting personally as well, because I also work in this industry, and China and they're supplying 90% of dysprosium, which goes into the neodymium magnets, which are utilized in almost every single EV that is there, the EV motors. So, if you mentioned about ferromagnets, are they working on ferrites, or is there any other form of mineral that they have identified which could replace dysprosium and potentially, or maybe some other form of alloy or magnet composition that they are working on? So, how exactly are they shifting their dependence from
You see, if you look
neodymium?
at Ola, Bajaj in
Right,
India, they have declared that they are able to reduce their dependency on rare earth standard one. So, as you know that you have basic four chemistries on which people are working. One
right,
is samarium based one where you have a Tesla values almost the same as NIB solutions. But there are aluminum, nickel, cobalt solution
right,
which is lesser in performance and energy density, but it can do your work.
right.
So that solution, and also if you look at in ferrite also with lesser energy density, you have some better property. If you look at America, America has started now from scratch funding programs where alternate source can be developed. So developing these sources are not very easy. If you look at the 1980s onward, this neodymium based solutions came up, whereas
Right.
solutions was from 1930.
Right.
So now it's a time that we start focusing new alternate solutions.
Of course, if we want to become more sustainable, in any case, we will have to reduce our dependence on some of the minerals. The process of extraction of minerals in itself is not sustainable. And from sustainability, this brings me to the next question. When we talk about green energy shift and the sustainable transition that we are looking at as of now, although a lot of the countries in the West consider this as a form of their way of somehow supporting and preserving the environment, but it is heavily dependent on the global south, which is South Africa, Africa in general, and South America. And a lot of the countries there, they do not feel it just to them that for the price for the world to be sustainable and eco-friendly is paid by them. The mineral mining, extraction, everything takes place there, and it reminds them of the colonial architecture, which is building upon their resources and sacrifice in a way. So, what do you have to say about that? Is that fair? Is there any way where we can align the global south with India? Which, and by the way, the African nations have been weaned away by the Chinese economy in general. China has been working extensively with those nations just to make sure that they are aware of that the West has been colonizing them, and they would be much better off if they just align themselves with China. So, how can India come here and align themselves with the global South? I think the global South in general respects the Indian government a lot.
I
I think
think,
we're in a very good position to do that.
Samriddhi, global south discourse has come up. Why? Because if you will realize the demographic distributions, the wealth distributions, and the need for mobility.
Right.
Two-wheeler mobility, for example, it's nearly 90% of the mobility needs are in global south. So therefore, what is important is that this 2070 target of carbon neutrality, the association of BRIC nations, and Global South concept of Global Biofuel Alliance. Similarly, the Global South discussion on rare earth metal is coming up only because we have recognized that the Global South countries are able to give perhaps the better sustainable world, sustainable earth goals. The Prime Minister's statement on our G20 presidency, Vasudhaiv Kutumbakam, one earth, one family, one future.
Right.
The basic tenets of that goal is that if you have to be sustainable, then sustainability comes from where? We need to decarbonize the transportation. Decarbonization of transportation can happen many ways. It can happen through electric vehicles, it can happen through biofuels, it can happen through gaseous fuels. So this CBG concept, the concept of ethanol, is actually coming out of the Global South cooperation. Brazil, for example,
Right.
India, Brazil. So we have a huge agrarian economy and we are able to provide the sustainability. So same way, I think we have to find solutions and give a sustainable future, a sustainable mobility, in a manner which is not taxing to one particular segment of or strata of society or one particular region. And that's where we feel that we need to have a kind of wake up call that select few nations or countries or strata should not be benefited at the cost of others.
Very true. I think we were also discussing about a more closer to home issues, which was about Jharkhand and Chhattisgarh. Would you like to elaborate on that as well? Because as we talk about the international issues of building on the backs of others, I think even we are guilty as charged of this particular problem. Every other state which is more prosperous has been built on the sacrifices of the states which are still struggling. There are many cities and many small villages where, because we have extracted uranium and other critical minerals, they are still struggling with the impacts of that. Would you like to elaborate on those
I think,
particular
Samriddhi,
issues?
it's given that every society has evolved, perhaps not always with equitable distribution of wealth,
Right.
equitable justice to each segment. So, example point in case is, for example, you take MP and Bihar.
Right.
MP was one of the largest state wherein constantly for the first 30 years post independence, I think the entire minerals, it was
Right.
coming from region of Chhattisgarh.
Right.
So coal, bauxite, iron ore, and that's the reason you will find plants like Bhilai steel plant was there, Balco's steel plants, for example, is coming from there. But there and power generation, I think the worlds are, I can say, the perhaps except China, the Korba is the place where the highest generation is happening through coal power plant, thermal power plant, NTPC
Right.
plants are there. But there was a feeling that that region remain underdeveloped compared to the rest of parts of Indore, Bhopal. And that's how the Prithak Chhattisgarh or a movement came up, and then Chhattisgarh became another state. Same story was Jharkhand. People felt perhaps the discrimination is happening, and that's how the Bihar was bifurcated and Jharkhand came as a separate state. So it's important that in national development policy, each state needs to be taken into account. And that's how you see in the council, whatever discussion happens, I think all states are taken into consideration, and any policy discourse or any policy implementation should not be discriminatory, or we have to compensate for some kind of loss which country, which specific region or state may have. For example, ethanol policy also, there are not all the states who are producing ethanol. So therefore, sometimes there is a feeling among states that if ethanol is produced by Maharashtra, Karnataka, and Uttar Pradesh, then why ethanol should be promoted, because it's benefiting more to only few states. So you have to have some kind of mechanism where everybody feels assured that they are part of this development goals. So to my mind, I think it's very important that each region must grow. And post, I think, 2014, the seven sister states which were otherwise hitherto neglected, Honorable Prime Minister always says that they have to be also part of the mainstreaming of the national development.
That's very true. I completely agree with it. And I think that the current government has taken a lot of initiatives which have developed these particular regions and states which were earlier neglected. And I think some of the policies have been, more focused on helping those regions more than the rest of the India. And I think that's completely fair. We are one country and that's how we need to grow. Every part has to be equally prosperous for a nation to be prosperous as a whole. So, are there any specific policies that you would like to highlight? I can highlight problems all day, but policies that have been in the favor of these particular states. Any one particular policy that comes to your mind and that can showcase, highlight how we're actually moving in a positive direction when it comes to supporting the regions which have been the backbone of the critical mineral supply chain for us as domestically as a nation.
No, I think the cess concept which has come
Right.
in, I think it is only to help each state.
Okay.
So with every ton of coal being extracted from a particular state or particular region, they are compensated for, and that fund
Right.
then is utilized for development of the local regions. So there are many policy frameworks, policy interventions which Government of India is coming up with time to time with the interactive consultative process. And to my mind, Government of India under Honorable Prime Minister's leadership is very comprehensively having a 360-degree view.
Right.
So if I talk about auto industry's growth, we have automotive mission plan. So earlier we had 25, 2015 first 10-year mission plan, then 2016 to 2026 second mission plan. Now we are working on the third mission plan, automotive mission plan. And there we are right from ensuring the mobility growth expectations with the clear supply chain requirements, energy mix management, and then availability of resources, because we need even to resource produce a vehicle, not only you need steel but almost 30 minerals you need, which is going into production of these vehicles. And we are hoping that by 2047, when we become a Viksit Bharat, I think 10x requirement will grow up what is there today. So today, for example, we are producing 2 crore two-wheelers annually,
Right.
and almost 4.3 million vehicles. You need to have these rare minerals, because there are magnets, motors,
Right.
integrated generators, then catalytic converters. So I think we need to recognize that to grow, we need to have very uninterrupted, consistent supply of these rare earth materials, whether it is coming through global tie-ups, whether it is domestically produced or it is recycled. In all three forms, we should ensure that we have uninterrupted supply of these materials.
So I think this brings me to my next question, which is more about the transparency. Supply chain has never been transparent. It's more of a global issue. If we have to talk about some of the high profile concerns which have been there about forced labor in China, there have been child labor in DRC, Democratic Republic of Congo, and there's been extensive greenwashing in ESG reports all across the sector. How do we enforce traceability, ethical practices? It's a multi value chain, it's a multi country value chain. It's difficult to trace every single step because somehow the whole process of mining in itself is not very much organized or digitalized. So, how do we make it more transparent and fair and ethical in the years to come?
I think, Samriddhi, it's given that with the explosion of connected world with social media in place,
Right.
these issues which were hitherto hidden
Mm.
has got exposed.
Right.
The very idea of the movie Blood Diamond
Right.
indicates that no longer in any part of the world
Mm.
with connected mobility or connected world concept with social media availability, you cannot hide. The things are coming to the fore. Now you are aware that which segment, which area, which region injustice is happening.
Right.
And that's where automatically you will find that interventions will have to be taken, and it will have to be accounted for. So if you look at if OEDC due diligence guidelines, when we talk about life cycle analysis or LC analysis of any of the options which we are trying to look at.
Right.
In recently Niti Aayog, we are looking for LC analysis. What happens if you go through ethanol route? What happens if you go through electric route? What happens
Okay.
if you go through the CNG route? So in entire life cycle analysis, what is it that you are doing? So you are only accounting for energy, CO2 footprint, or you are also accounting for the social stress, the deprivation. So I think when we say the sustainable approach, so sustainability has more important parameters. One, the sustainability should not have any distress. Sustainability should not have exclusions. Sustainability should not have fatalities. Sustainability should not have the emission out, for example, which causes global warming. So
Right.
these all five elements have to be zero.
Right.
That is the goal we should have towards sustainability. So the moment you have a societal distress, that means you are not sustainable. The moment we have exclusions, I cannot build an oasis and claim to be having a sustainable world, because outside my region there has to be also the prosperity. I cannot be alone prosperous. So if we actually assume and imagine a world which is sustainable, which is prosperous, which is peaceful, I think we have to ensure that each region is duly represented and gets its dues. And that's where equitable distribution of wealth, that's where the equitable justice, national determined goals concept has come only because of that.
Right.
Because every region, every country is in different phase of life. Why India has chosen 2070 as a carbon neutrality, not 2035 or 2045? because we have to determine our own requirements,
Right.
and that's where actually it should be respected.
Whenever I hear about the ethical issues, my mind immediately goes towards, because I come from a space and aerospace background, it goes towards the question of asteroid mining. And a lot of developed nations are looking toward this particular thing, although it is still hypothetical and still not feasible at all. And from where I look at it, I believe that asteroid mining is probably one of the reasons, because of why there is a space race going on, specifically between Russia, US, and China. What does the Indian lawmakers think about it, or do they not want to talk about this topic? It's too unrealistic as of now, in your opinion.
No, I think look at the development in the last 40 years,
Right.
where we were and where we are. Now there's a talk that China is selling land in moon,
Yes.
and everybody is trying to get to moon. We landed on the south side of the moon, which was unheard. So I think it's a near future, I think, possibility.
Right.
If you see SpaceX and all claims, anyway, we will be touring very soon space as a regular basis. So I think colonization of planets outside Earth
Mm.
is a possibility. And therefore, from there, always you can realize that asteroid mining is one thing. I would say
Untapped
that first thing
potential.
is the moon is the nearest place where we can always colonize and then support the specific needs.
True.
So I don't see it very far. It's not very
Okay.
far.
I heard that somebody was setting up a nuclear reactor. I'm not sure which country was it, but somebody is setting up a nuclear reactor on moon
Yes,
now.
yes,
And I think in 10 years' time we'll be having factories on moon.
yes, yes, that's
So
correct.
I'm definitely looking forward to that.
So I think it's a very, very near time possibilities.
Right.
And with this AI, machine learning, and
Right.
the dominance of computers, supercomputers over human mind, I think anything is possible in
The rise of
time.
artificial intelligence.
Yes.
That's very interesting. So, this brings us to our last question. If you have to give three recommendations to the policymaker for a more sovereign supply chain for the critical minerals, what will be the three non negotiables from your side? What should they focus on for India to become more self reliant when it comes to the critical mineral supply chain in general?
I think first is everything one nation alone cannot do. Even
Okay.
if you imagine and put all your resources, you have to depend on other countries. So, therefore, I think the first and foremost is you must tie up the global resources with your like minded, friendly countries and
Okay.
ensure that you are able to survive. So, survival is first thing. After survival, once you survive, economically you survive, then it comes the self reliance. So, first is survival, second is self reliance, and the third one would be sovereignty. So, I would urge that knowing the cusp of a time we are in, the aspirations we have to grow, the dependency we have on technology, the resources, not only for oil, energy needs, but also the rare earth. We need to build bridges, collaborate, cooperate, and tie up resources with like minded, friendly countries. It's first part. And then survive. When we survive, parallelly, we must have our self reliant approach of exploring and developing our local own resources. And then the third one is whatever you have, you can just recycle them and be dependent. And that's how you develop your sovereignty. Otherwise, sovereignty without assurance of survival has no meaning.
Okay. I think this was very much informative. Even for me, there was so many things that I was not aware about that were taking place in the mineral supply chain and the policies that have been made in this particular sector. So thank you so much, Dr. Banerjee, for joining us today. This was a very insightful session for the audience and for me personally as well. Thank you so much for taking out time.
Samriddhi, for me also, it's a very useful interaction with you because automobile industry is one sunshine sector which is hoping to contribute to the growth of Indian economy and make and realize Viksit Bharat dream of 2047. Thank you.
And to our listeners, thank you for joining us today and stay tuned for the next episode of Vision 2060.